Hey everyone. Tonight, we begin not with beer steins and brash crowds, but with the quiet, suffocating fear that settled into the hearts of Jewish families in 1930s Berlin. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely appreciate these unsettling journeys. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's listening here. Now, let's settle in as we begin our adventure through Berlin. You might imagine bustling cafes, orderly trams, and lively markets in 1930s Berlin. But for the average Jewish family under the rising shadow of Nazism, daily life was less about stout schnitzel and more about how do we not disappear tonight. It wasn't just a society. It was a slow, suffocating pressure cooker that turned every routine into a test of endurance, like an especially cruel instructor who refused to let you pass. Picture this. You live in a modest 3-room flat in Prenzlauer Berg. The building's facade still bears the faded sign of a once proud bakery, but now the windows are plastered with Juden raus leaflets. Juden raus means Jews out. Rumors swirl that the local Nazi organization, known as the Sturmabteilung SA, or Storm Detachment, is planning another public march through the neighborhood. You know that even the SA, a paramilitary group of brown-shirted thugs, can make life heuristically unpredictable. There's no insulation unless you count the dozen layers of newspapers tacked over the single pane of glass. Heat? Ha! Whoever has the closest spot to the small, sputtering coal stove gets to feel their toes. Even then, only for a minute at a time before the draft, or a neighbor, steals it away. Strictly speaking, Berlin's winters aren't Arctic, but inside that flat, it feels like Siberia. The walls are thin, patched with mismatched wallpaper strips that do little to block the cold. On a windy night, you can hear a single pigeon sneeze on the rooftop before the wind snatches it away. The narrow corridor outside your front door seems to stretch on forever, lit only by a half-functional gas lamp that sputters and flickers like a dying flame. Once, you watched a lone SA patrol saunter down this hallway, boots tapping in unison. 2 clicks, a pause, 2 clicks. You held your breath until the pattern fell behind the brick wall, praying they had no reason to knock on your door. Mornings begin in near darkness because street lamps flicker out early, and any light after 9 p.m. risks a raid. You wake to the scratch of heavy boots above your ceiling, perhaps another neighbor rounded up for Vernehmung, interrogation. The sheer weight of hearing that German word in the early hours can knot your stomach. A quick glance at the clock confirms it's 5:30 a.m. and you haven't truly slept. Nightmares of brown-shirted officers barging in have you crawling over rags to look out the peephole. The corridor is silent, except for the shuffling of a maid carrying your neighbor's morning coffee, if she's still employed. Many service workers have already lost their jobs or fled the city. Your father slips into threadbare pants patched with faded denim and calls for you to bundle up. The Reichsmark doesn't warm on cold mornings, so he layers on an old wool overcoat that smells faintly of smoke and vinegar, thanks to last week's sold-out onions at the market. He smacks you gently on the shoulder. Denk daran, no running near the municipal baths. Too many rumors of Gestapo stings. Denk daran means remember. Your father's words are half warning, half prayer. You nod, stuffing a stale roll into your pocket. Nothing left in the kitchen besides a few scraps of cabbage. Even potatoes are rationed now. Your mother keeps the rations card clenched in her fists, as if it were a talisman. At the street corner, a small group of SA members, recognizable by their brown shirts and insignia, loom by the tram stop, rifles slung over leather straps. The SA, or Sturmabteilung, literally translates to Storm Detachment. They're the first building block of Hitler's paramilitary backbone. You keep your gaze low. If they notice you're circumcised, if they notice anything, you could be sent to forced labor by daybreak, or worse. Instead of the usual banter about sports scores or theater tickets, the cold morning air carries only half-whispered warnings. Jemand hat die SS an der Markthalle Ost gesehen. Someone saw the SS at the East Market Hall. Hast du gehört, sie schließen wieder den jüdischen Bezirk ab? Did you hear they're sealing off the Jewish district again? You taste bile at the thought of further isolation, but force yourself to breathe through your nose, gently warming each inhale so you don't cough or draw attention. By 10 a.m., your mother finally emerges from your cramped flat, carefully puckering her lips as though to blow out a candle before speaking. Her coat is buttoned all the way up, collar nearly grazing her chin, a makeshift armor against prying eyes. Today is the day of the weekly ration card renewal, and the line snakes around 2 blocks. You clutch a thin paper folder, stamped with a yellow Star of David, your very identity boiled down to a jagged piece of bureaucratic stationery. The line barely inches forward, moving at the pace of molasses. At times, you feel like you're wading through treacle, the breath of the people ahead, forming tiny clouds that drift into your vision and vanish. Families huddle close, almost shoulder to shoulder, because proximity offers faint warmth. An elderly woman in front of you hums a Yiddish lullaby softly, as if to remind herself of a life before these horrors. You press your cheek against your overcoat, catching a whiff of her shawl, stale lavender mixed with age and unspoken sorrow. Behind you, a father hushes his daughter, reminding her not to chew on her fingers. Nicht so laut, Fräulein, not so loud. Too loud means drawing attention. A single misstep, a mere cough at the wrong moment, and a uniformed officer could bark, "Schnell, vorwärts!" Quickly, move forward, pushing you along with the butt of his rifle. When your turn finally arrives, the clerk barely glances at your documents. He's a thin man with a pencil stub moustache, eyes as dull as rotten cheese. "Name," he grunts without looking up. You whisper, voice cracking. He flicks his pen across the table, sending a loose menu fluttering to the floor. Geburtsdatum? Date of birth? You recite it automatically. 7. März 1924. He stamps the folder with a jagged black ink Star of David and hands it back with disdain. No smile, no apology, just a grunt. Waiter. Next. Beneath that yellow paper star, you're still a person, but he treats you like a leaky bucket of nothing. You clamp your jaw as you shuffle past, half expecting a slap for daring to move so slowly. At lunchtime, you and your sister run errands while braving lunch hour crowds that stare or, worse, pretend not to see you. The local bakery, once a warm refuge for fresh pretzels and rye loaves, now keeps its shutters closed. Instead, you settle for a lukewarm bowl of turnip soup from a street vendor, just enough to quell your hunger pangs. The vendor doesn't need to ask if you're Jewish. He recognizes your yellow folder. Nur ein bisschen Suppe heute. Just a little soup today? He asks, his eyes flicking to the folder. You nod, hands shaking as you pay with the ration stamp. Each bite tastes like ash, but at least it's warm. Afternoon brings its own perils. You wander home along Königsallee, where a cluster of brown shirts, members of the SA, are tearing down synagogue posters advertising the upcoming High Holy Days. They rip each poster with fangs of hate, crumpling them into dusty heaps. Broken glass from shattered windows glitters in muddy puddles like confetti tossed at a grotesque carnival. Children in school uniforms cower behind their mothers' skirts, peering over shoulders to catch glimpses of the destruction. You pull your shawl tighter and pretend you're invisible, but you know your yellow star marks you as prey. Spring 1935 looms, and with it comes the blood-soaked shadow of the Nuremberg laws. On September 15, 1935, Reich citizenship law strips German Jews of their citizenship, relegating them to mere subjects, never to be Germans in body or mind. The law for the protection of German blood and German honor forbids marriage or sexual relations between Jews and so-called Aryan Germans. You still feel the sting of concentration, though you know full well that the ground is moving beneath your feet. Rumors spread that families now must price their belongings for some forced sale, or else have them seized. Your father sells the piano he built with his own hands, a family heirloom, for a pittance, just enough to avoid door-to-door confiscation. He promises your mother that maybe one of her brothers can send money from abroad. But the letters, once hopeful and frequent, have slowed to nearly nothing. By late 1935, your family's small bakery, once known for its golden brown challah, can no longer afford the license fees. Your father watches as SS, Schutzstaffel, Protection Squadron, the Nazi Party's elite paramilitary wing. Officers deliver the final legal verdict. Betrieb schließen, Geschäft schließen. Close the business, shut shop. He locks the door for the final time and turns the key, as if sealing away the last remnants of your old life. The smell of stale bread lingers in the doorway, a final goodbye to the life you once took for granted. Behind that locked door, your mother's tears are quiet and jagged, her sobs muffled by the thin walls. You've witnessed grief many times, when your puppy died last winter, when your aunt passed away in Poland. But this grief is metallic, hollow, like hope draining out through a tiny crack. You sit cross-legged on the hardwood floor, the intake of breath in your chest sounding like the gulping of an upturned sieve. Each day now begins with new restrictions. You can't attend the local Catholic school any longer. Jewish children are forced into separate classes in the back of dingy buildings, taught by underpaid teachers in overcrowded conditions. Your uniform, once crisp and pressed, now bears an iron-pressed yellow star sewn into your vest. Jude, Jew, printed in bold black letters. In class, you sit at the back of the room, shoulders hunched, listening to whispers from classmates who mutter under their breath. Schau, das sind die Judenkinder. Look, there are the Jewish kids. You nod to yourself, remembering your father's warning. Kopf unten, Augen unten. Head down, eyes down. Talking back means detention, if you even make it that far. In 1936, Berlin brims with propaganda for the Olympic Games, scheduled to showcase the Fourth Reich to the world. Parades of flamboyantly uniformed stormtroopers march in perfect alignment down unter den Linden. They march past your flat, and if you glance up, an SA officer will bark at you to step aside. Aus dem Weg, out of the way. The streets shine with swastika banners and National Socialism's promises of grandeur. But for Jewish families like yours, it's a grotesque circus of avoidance. Neighbors close their curtains at the sight of you. Shopkeepers avert their eyes as you pass, as if it's contagious to be Jewish. You wonder if the world is watching Berlin's grand performance, or if everyone just pretends the Jews don't exist during the televised ceremonies. Then comes November 9th to 10th, 1938. Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. The air smells of kerosene and fear. You hear a strange, constant rumble outside, the roar of engines, shouted orders, and the crack of batons smashing window after window. From your window, you witness flames rising from a synagogue on the other side of the street. The Torah scrolls inside burning in orange tongues, scattering ash across the sidewalk. The sound of glass shattering, thousands of delicate shards raining down like cold, deadly confetti, echoes through the night. You press your palms tightly over your ears as though to hold the world together. You recognize some of the men who rush through the streets, SA thugs you once called neighbors. Now, their looted property, smirking as they drag grandmother's silver candlesticks toward waiting trucks. Your grandmother stands in the hallway, eyes glassy, nostrils flaring at the acrid smoke. She clutches father's press-handled Damascus knife, the one she used to protect herself in Poland decades ago. You never knew she could look so fierce, but her strength can't stop the men who pound on your door at 2 a.m. They don't speak. They simply shove it open and storm inside. Your father goes for the knife, but a gloved boot slams into his wrist, sending the knife clattering across the floor. Mother cries, "Bitte, bitte, lass uns in Ruhe, please, leave us alone." But her voice cracks under the weight of terror. The men shove her aside and shove your father against the wall. Wo sind die Juden? Hände hoch. Wo sind die Juden? Hands up. They round up every male over 16. Your father and your older brothers, one 20 years old and the other 17, are herded like cattle into trucks bound for Dachau concentration camp. Your mother and grandmother collapse onto the floor, arms entwined, sobbing. There's nothing you can do but hold your sister, clutching one another in frantic, shallow breaths, praying that the screaming will end. You hear the engine roar and the truck lurch away, carrying the men who once whispered bedtime stories. Kristallnacht signals a violent acceleration. Synagogue doors are boarded up, Jewish shops are looted, and rumors gleam that dozens have been killed. You lie awake that night, counting each inhale, each exhale, wondering if your father's alive. The days after Kristallnacht bleed one into another. Your father, miraculously, returns home after 3 weeks. He's gaunt, skeleton thin, with a Gethsemane-like stare. The men at Dachau punched him relentlessly for refusing to scrub the latrines with bare hands and for standing too tall when guards cursed. He's home, but not unbroken. His ribs whisper cracks when he breathes. He tucks his family into corner chairs, too weak to hold their eyes for more than a moment. He blinks, as if remembering that he has children to love. You stare at his hands, scarred from working the ovens, hands that once kneaded dough into golden challah. Now, they barely wrap around your mother's trembling ones. Winter, 1938, brings even harsher decrees. Jews must have written permission to own radios. Your only means of hearing news from abroad vanishes as you hand over your father's shortwave receiver. The taste of silence is bitter. Without that tin box crackling with faraway voices, you only have rumors, like cold whispers swirling near your ear. Some say the Allies will bomb Germany soon. Others say Hitler is invincible. No one knows for sure. Your family can only guess by the flicker of candlelight through the curtained window. By mid-1939, you find yourself standing in a registration office again, this time for forced relocation paperwork. Brown-shirted Gestapo officers verify your address and order you to gather a few belongings. Jewish families must move into the designated Jewish quarter, Judenviertel, a cramped neighborhood near the eastern rail yards. You have 2 hours to pack. You cram old blankets, faded clothes, and your mother's heirloom menorah, an object that meant everything until now, into one threadbare suitcase. Father locks the flat door behind you, placing a sign on the handle. Bewohner ausgezogen. Occupant moved out. A silent warning for anyone who might take what remains. In the Judenviertel, the streets feel narrower, the buildings taller, as if crowding around you to suffocate your breath. Each apartment is divided. Your family of 4 makes do with one room, while 5 other families share the same floor. You sleep on a stack of fold-out cots that creak like dying birds. In the communal kitchen downstairs, mothers pass around scraps of stale bread, everyone sharing what little they have. At night, you can hear men arguing about black market prices for potatoes, whispering conspiratorial details about who was seen talking to Polish smugglers. Your mother tucks you in with admonitions. Iss das Brot vorsichtig, eat the bread carefully. Each crumb is a potential lifeline. September 1st, 1939. Germany invades Poland. News reaches the quarter via underground refugees. Attack, bombardment, mass arrests. You don't know if the world outside is at peace or at war. You only know fear. A week later, your father is arrested again. This time, forced into labor for a road crew outside Berlin. He spends 12 hours a day shoveling gravel under stormy skies, watched by an SS officer's steely eyes. He returns home at night, his uniform caked in mud, legs trembling so badly he can barely stand. The work is meant to break him. You know because the neighbors, once your friends, tell you in hushed voices, wird fallen wie ein Baum ohne Wurzeln. He will fall like a tree without roots. They're wrong to pity him. His roots are deep, grown in the soil of survival. Spring blooms in 1940, but there's no life in the Judenviertel. The walls of houses are scrawled with Juden verboten, Jews forbidden, marking places where once placid shops thrived. Your sister develops a persistent cough, possibly tuberculosis masked by malnourishment. There are no doctors willing to help Jews, and the local hospital has a sign, Nur für Arya, for Aryans only. Your mother stitches rags to cushion your sister's chest at night, teaching her to breathe through her nose to avoid chilling her lungs. You learn to do it too, breathing shallow and slow, like learning to swim through a pool of ice. In early 1941, the first deportations to the east begin. Rumors swirl of resettlement in territories east of the Reich, but you suspect it means something far darker. One evening, Gestapo cars screech to a stop outside the quarter. They blaze flashlights into open windows and shout names in guttural voices. Cohen, Koppel, Grünberg, Packen, Schnell! Pack up quickly. Your turn comes. They shove you and your sister into a cattle car with 14 other families. The doors slam shut behind you. The walls are covered in straw, and the reek of fear is as thick as the filth beneath your fingernails. You taste your own saliva, salty and metallic. The train lurches into motion. The squeal of steel on steel echoes like a death knell. For days, the train snakes through Eastern Europe. The windows are small slits, barely big enough for a sliver of sky. The only light inside is a single dim lantern hanging from a rusty metal hook. You share a rusty bucket in the corner for water, none of it clean, and each sip tastes like swill. Your sister lies motionless against your side, fever burning under your palm. You hum a lullaby in Yiddish, a faint spark of hope in that pitch-dark coffin on wheels. The train stops at a station with broken platforms, Auschwitz. You hear a voice bark, "Raus! Out!" When you step onto the jagged cobblestones, the bitter wind smells of smoke and salt. Families stream out into rows of SS guards behind barbed wire. Some are ordered left, others right. The SS officers shout, "Arbeit, Lebensunwert," work, worthless life. You don't fully understand German, but you sense the verdict. Your sister, pale as a porcelain doll, is grouped with children and elderly to the right, those deemed unfit for work, destined for the gas chambers. Your heart stutters, lungs searing as you scream her name. A guard shoves you aside. "Beruhige dich, Jude. Calm down, Jew." You nearly collapse onto the gravel as your sister is led away, her tiny hand slipping from yours. You and your father, deemed able to work, are sent to the left. In that moment, you lose half your soul. Days in Auschwitz are a haze of forced labor, stacking logs, building fences, digging trenches, under the watch of armed guards. The barracks are overcrowded. You share 2 wooden bunks with 8 others. The mattresses are straw stuffed into dirty canvas, straw that's crawling with lice. Every breath fogs the frigid air, and each inhale feels like inhaling shards of glass. You and father, huddle within a single tattered blanket at night, shivering until the dawn roll call. The SS officer yells, "Entreten!" Fall in, and you march out, barefoot across frosted mud, your toes biting into your bones. Your world shrinks to the camp's concrete boundaries. The only landmarks are the tower, its searchlight cutting arcs across the sky, and the double chimneys of the crematoria billowing smoke. You learn to stand perfectly still when the guards patrol, pretending to be statues carved from ice. Father buries your sister's tattered shawl deep in the straw. He whispers to her ghost, "Schlaf gut, mein Kind. Sleep well, my child." Each night, you pray the SS has mercy, but you know mercy is a word reserved for them, not for you. Months march by. Rations shrink from watery soup and black bread to nearly nothing. You become a hollow silhouette of a person, counting down the hours inside your own ribcage. One heartbeat, so tired it feels like lead. Another heartbeat, so slow it feels like time crawling backwards. You cut a tiny sliver of hardened bread and hide it beneath a loose floorboard. If they catch you, you know you'll be shot. But you can't stop now. You need that crumb to keep your stomach from liquefying into emptiness. One day, in late 1942, as you toil in the gravel pit, you spot a group of Sonderkommando in a separate compound. Those prisoners are forced to dispose of bodies, removing bodies from gas chambers, dragging them to crematoria, shoveling bone fragments into the ovens. You see them catch your eye. One of them nods imperceptibly, just a flick of his eyelids. You know he's thinking, "Wie lange noch?" How much longer? You want to scream, "Ich auch." Me too. But the words stick in your throat. Instead, you focus on the rasp of shovels against cement, the dull echo of metal, the hum of despair that never ends. It's early 1943 when you hear rumors of an uprising inside the camp. A small group of prisoners, some SS-trained, plan to blow up the crematorium. Each stolen screw and bolt is hidden inside bread crusts passed from one to another. Father tells you, in hushed whispers, "When we're fallen zusammen. If we fall together." You nod, gripping his calloused hand. Father has taught you that solidarity can be a weapon sharper than any knife. But the uprising doesn't come. You hear later that the SS discovered the plan, executing many conspirators in front of the entire camp. Their screams echo in your nightmares for months. April 1944. You collapse in the gravel pit one morning, fever burning your veins, head pounding like a war drum. Father drags you back to the infirmary, where you're greeted by a nurse in a grey smock. "Keine Sorge, Mädchen." Don't worry, girl. But worry is all you feel. Your vision blurs as she thrusts a ration of watery soup into your hands. You swallow each spoonful like it's liquid fire, feeling it scorch your throat. Days later, you wake in a small, ice-cold ward. Barracks for the sick, Krankenbau, host an endless flow of the dying. The stench of rot clings to the walls. You hear coughing fits from every corner. Dry coughs, wet coughs. Coughs so desperate they sound like a person tearing out their own throat. You slip between delirium and consciousness, the world tilting as if you're trapped on a rotating carousel of madness. When you finally recover, just enough to stand, you see Father standing nearby, fatigue etched into his every line. His eyes brim with hushed relief. He holds a small loaf of bread in each hand, one for you, one for him. You share a single nibble. It tastes of salvation and sorrow. You press your forehead against his chest, listening to his pulse. 1 beat, 2 beats, the steady rhythm that kept you alive. It's June 1944 when the campground trembles beneath the distant thunder of Allied bombers. The sky is an ocean of smoke and fire as American B-17 flying fortresses swoop overhead. The prisoners press their faces against the barbed wire fence, mouths agape at the distant silhouette of bombers glinting in the sunset. Freiheit. Freedom. The whispered word catches in your throat. You've never been so sure of any promise. The days blur again as SS officers hastily shepherd prisoners deeper into the camp. You're part of a death march, orders to evacuate Auschwitz as the Red Army approaches. They bind your wrists with rope and force you to stumble through fields of scorched earth, under a sky that's the color of ash. Each step feels like walking through quicksand. Frostbite creeps into your toes, turning them black, one by one. But as night falls on January 27, 1945, Soviet troops enter the camp gates. They find 7,000 surviving prisoners, half of them on the brink of death. You, miraculously, are among them, skin and bone, breathing shallow, but alive. You step out onto frozen ground that crackles beneath your feet. The smoke from the crematoria still curls like a wounded serpent. You draw in a lungful of sub-zero air. Dust, you whisper, amazed that cold can sting so ferociously. In the days that follow, the camp's makeshift hospital and the local Polish villagers tend to the survivors. You receive a shiny tin mug of warm tea and a loaf of black bread. When you drink that tea, it tastes like the very essence of life itself. When you take that first swallow, you feel tears sting your eyes, not from sorrow, but from a shock of gratitude. As you gradually heal, you begin to reconstruct your identity. Your father helps you shave the stubbly hair on your head, remnants of the head-shaving practice in the camp. You wrap a scarf around it, bright red fabric stolen from a farmer's cart. Back then, colour was a sin. Now colour feels like a rebirth. In spring 1945, a transport ship carries you and other survivors to Stalag XB, a displaced persons camp in Lower Saxony. The camp is a tangle of tents pitched on muddy fields. You share a tent with 8 other survivors, some Polish Jews, some Hungarian Jews, some Roma. The communal latrines are bullets of grey huts, one for men, one for women. You learn to queue in line once more, this time for warm soup, warm blankets, and the right to an identity beyond Jude or prisoner number 54,789. One day in late May, an American sergeant with a kind face and tears in his eyes arranges to take you to the town hall. There, he fills out paperwork for your new Ken card, identity card. Next to your name, it simply says you, Neue Identität, new identity. You finally feel like a person again, bogged by guilt that so many other cards lay blank next to so many names unspoken. By July 1945, your father and you board a repatriation train bound for Paris. From there, you intend to travel to Palestine, still under British mandate, where Zionist organizations promise new beginnings. En route, you stand by the window, watching fields of sunflowers sway under a pale sky. You run your fingers along the scratch of the train window, feeling how fragile hope can be. In Paris, the city of cafes and culture, you feel a pang of irony. Where once you watched synagogue windows burn, you now watch the Eiffel Tower's silhouette glint at twilight. You and father share crepes from a street cart, as nervous and hopeful as 2 ghosts returning to life. Father whispers, "Wir haben überlebt." We survived. Not with triumphalism, but with quiet reverence for every stolen day. When you finally reach Haifa aboard a battered British ship, you step onto a beach you once only knew through prayers and dream. The shore is rocky, but the water glitters under a golden sun, as if beckoning you forward. You clutch father's hand, feeling the warmth of living muscle. You watch other refugees arrive, Hungarian families clutching newborns, Polish orphans skipping across the sand like sudden sparks of life. Somewhere, someone hums a Hebrew lullaby. In Palestine, You settle first in a kibbutz near Haifa. You and father live in a small hut made of cinder blocks, purchased with the last of your meager savings. There's no privacy. Other survivors exchange memories in the courtyard. Voices hush, laughter trembles. You dig your fingers into the red earth to plant olive trees, trees you may never live to see bear fruit. But each seed you bury in that soil feels like another promise. You will not be forgotten. In 1948, Israel's War of Independence begins. You don't have much choice. Either help defend your new home or risk losing everything again. At 19, you join a women's paramilitary unit to cook for soldiers and transport supplies to the front lines. You wear a khaki uniform and a cap, feeling the fabric on your skin like a rebirth. Each time you strap a water canteen across your back, you feel the weight of every Holocaust victim on your shoulders. You carry their ghosts with you through the desert scrub. When the war ends, Israel's independence is declared, May 14th, 1948. You stand on the roof of your kibbutz, watching fireworks, shadows of smoke blooming above a soil you helped break. You taste tears on your lips as you hold father's calloused hand. He whispers, "Wir sind frei." We are free. Those words taste like honey warmed by the sun. Even your aunt, who once took her final breath in a gas chamber, seems to stir in your mind at that moment. You blink against the fireworks, remembering her lullabies. Life in Israel is another test of resilience. You and father teach at a Tanakh school, lessons in Hebrew Bible and Jewish culture. You watch children recite psalms and stories of Abraham, Sarah, and Moses, as if you're living proof of those ancient promises fulfilled. At night, you sit by a small radio, listening to broadcasts from Berlin, strange echoes from a past life you now inhabit only through memory. Sometimes you scrawl letters to former neighbors, if any survived, telling them you're alive and building a new world. Every year on Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, the kibbutz gathers by a memorial, a single flame flickering in a stone courtyard. You stand voice barely a whisper, reciting the Kaddish, the mourner's prayer. You think of your sister who perished on the freight car, her name a hollow ache in your chest. You light a second candle for her. L'chaim, to life, you murmur. Though her life was stolen, her memory ignites something fierce in you. An enduring commitment to ensure never again remains more than just a whispered vow. As decades pass, you find marriage and start a family. You name your daughter after your lost sister. You teach her English, Hebrew, Yiddish, languages that carry your history. At bedtime, you hum that same lullaby your grandmother sang to you. Your daughter sleeps beneath a quilt pieced together from remnants of your old dresses, fabric so thin it's like memory itself. She touches the quilt with her small fingers, and you whisper, "Dies ist deine Geschichte." This is your story. You become a storyteller, visited by schools, universities, and memorials across the globe. Your voice cracks as you recount the nights in Berlin, the smell of burning wood, the taste of those final stale crackers. You show people old photographs, a black and white portrait of a young girl you once were, standing before the grated window of your Prenzlauer Berg flat. You point to the Star of David on your coat. This was my prison uniform before it was my badge of shame. People sit in silence, some weep, some shake their heads, unable to reconcile the horror with their humanity. Yet you never speak with anger. Instead, you speak quietly, soft as a prayer, as if you're convinced that raising your voice could shatter the fragile peace you fought so hard to build. You tell them that even in that suffocating darkness, there were moments of tenderness, the kindness of a Polish farmer who shared a turnip, the silent solidarity of a fellow prisoner who shared his bread crust, the warmth of your father's hand when the barbed wire fence blocked out all hope. And so your life becomes more than your survival. It becomes testimony. You remind each listener that beneath every date stamped in a gas chamber's ledger lies a person who once whispered a prayer. Every time you stand before a crowd, you feel the weight of 6 million souls carried on your chest. And each word you utter is offered as a fragile bridge between a shattered past and a future that must never forget. For the next story, we arrive at Auschwitz, that sprawling testament to human cruelty tucked into the icy plains of southern Poland. This is no scenic travelogue. There are no picturesque forests or rolling hills here, only barbed wire, stench, and whispers of lives snuffed out like candles in a draught. Imagine a landscape of cold stone corridors and endless rows of bunks where dreams, if they existed at all, froze before they could even begin. Imagine stepping off a freight train into a biting wind that carries with it the scent of smoke and decay. Smoke from the chimneys of brick ovens that burn human ash. Decay because every breath here tastes of rot. Gravel crunches beneath your feet as a gaunt guard in an SS uniform barks in German. Raus! Raus aus dem Wagon! Out! Out of the wagon! Your legs tremble and you realize that even standing straight feels like too much effort. The morning sky is slate grey, cold enough to draw icicles from your nose before you even lower your head. Families and strangers are jostled together like cattle around a loading dock. There is no platform, no station, only broken boards and concrete slabs splashed with the muddy runoff of melting snow. You clutch your single suitcase, if you were allowed one, barely big enough for a thin set of clothes and a worn photograph of your mother. SS officers scream questions and orders in clipped tones. Familien zusammenbleiben, Kinder da drüben, Alte und Kranke, rechts. Families stay together, children over there, old and sick, right. That is your first clue that the world has shifted on its axis. Left means work, right means the gas chamber. You feel your sister's hand slip from yours as you're shoved left toward the sea of uniforms and boots. You scream her name, but your voice is swallowed by the roar of boots and barking dogs. You are surrounded by strangers wearing the same faded, striped pajamas, jailers without walls. Every pair of eyes is hollow, some resigned, some defiant, some too broken to look at you at all. You blink away frozen tears and step forward, a single solitary number eventually tattooed on your forearm. 127589. Your name, once source of pride and identity, is now a fading echo. Your number is all that remains. You wander through grainy gravel to barracks block B-2A. The air is a pungent cocktail of damp straw, sweat, excrement, and unending fear. Rows of wooden barracks stretch to the horizon, roughly 200 yards long, each split into cramped cubicles with wooden bunks stacked 3 high. You help your father climb onto the middle bunk, where 6 men lie already, bodies as thin as sticks, faces blank masks of survival. The beds are straw pallets stuffed into filthy canvas, straw so old it has turned dusty grey and crawls with lice. Nighttime brings no solace. The bunks are overcrowded, 12 men on a single side of the block, sharing blankets so thin they barely stop the wind. One man coughs incessantly, tuberculosis you suspect, though nobody has a proper diagnosis. The rasping sound echoes off wooden walls, blending with the low hum of desperate prayers. You count your breaths. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Each breath a labor, each exhale a reminder that this is no place for living. The toilets are communal trenches carved into the earth. Wooden planks partially cover them, but the gaps are wide enough to expose the sickening swirl of water, half frozen, layered with filth. You learn to step very carefully, eyes forward, stomach clenched, toes numb from the cold. You hold your breath while you squat, each second stretching into an eternity until the urgent need is done. At dawn, a whistle shrieks across the compound, slicing through the frost like a knife. You stumble out of your bunk, fumbling with threads of consciousness that cling to your mind like cobwebs. The guard's harsh voice carries over the icy wind. Antreten! Fall in. Everyone scrambles barefoot across the frozen mud, toes blackening as blood recedes under the harsh winter sky. Children are rarely here, but teenage boys find their ribs scraping cold air as they line up shoulder to shoulder, resembling spectres from a nightmare. You join the formation, noticing how every person stands void of movement. No fidgeting, no whispering, no shifting weight. One misstep, and you hear a shot ring out, someone collapsing like a severed puppet. You learn that guards patrol the lines with rifle butts in hand. Do not flinch. Do not shift. Do not breathe too heavily. You tilt your head to meet father's eyes. Same tears, same terror, shared in silence. Minutes pass like hours. Frost gathers on your eyelashes. You watch your breath become tiny clouds that disappear too quickly. As the sun rises, the orange glow feels like a cruel joke. It lights up the evening sky, unfelt on your cold flesh. Your ankles ache, your knees quiver, but you stand tall, determined to avoid the guard's wrath. Achtung! Attention! He bellows, and you snap to a rigid posture, like a well-trained soldier in a faded uniform of rags. After what feels like an eternity, the guards mere inches from your face, one finally calls, Raus zum Arbeitskommando. Out to the work detail. You stumble from the icy mud to a separate formation, where groups are sorted again. Electricians, carpenters, dock workers. You think you might be sent to the ammunition dump until the guard points to you, father, and half a dozen other men. Builder detail. You feel relief and dread in equal measure. Building here means lifting stones all day with no gloves, your hands freezing and skin splitting with every chisel of rock. You trudge behind a concentration of half-frozen prisoners to the gravel pit, an open expanse of frost-hardened earth where stones lie like shards of broken teeth. Your task: load wheelbarrows with heavy rocks and roll them to mortar stations. The SS officer overseeing you sports a whip-like stick, snapping it across your back when you slow. The pain is white-hot, radiating through your spine as you bend to pick up another fist-sized rock. Your muscles twitch with every movement, already exhausted by the bitter cold. Lunch break. A half-frozen bowl of watery soup tastes like nothing you've ever known. You drink spoonfuls as if they contain your very life, while keeping one eye on the guard's rifle. When soup ends, you shuffle back to the pit until the whistle shrieks again. The sun dips low, the wind cuts deeper, and your bare ankles burn with frostbite. You wrap your threadbare rags tighter around your feet, but the warmth never lingers. As you work alongside father, a silent sentinel whose weary eyes remind you of your own impending fate, you learn that the hardest challenge here isn't the physical labor, but the constant ache of hope being chipped away alongside the gravel. Saturdays, Sundays, there are no rest days. There are only fewer work assignments. Often you remain in the barracks, standing at attention for extended roll calls to punish the absence of labor. You learn that idleness is a crime here, punishable by 2 days without soup or a beating for the pack leader. Pack leaders are prisoners themselves, promoted into a twisted hierarchy, given slight privileges, forced to police their own. You keep your head low, pretending to be invisible, but you sense their eyes drill into your back, waiting for any hint of weakness. Some assigned to the brick factory across the road. You watch wagons loaded with coal being shoveled into kilns by convicts dressed in civilian clothes, paid labourers from the nearby town. They stare at you as if you're a creature from a nightmare. You watch the bricks being formed, wet clay pressed, baked in ovens that glow like the gates of hell. When you carry bricks back for walls, the heat sears your numb fingertips. Each brick becomes heavier, your body more fragile. After a week, your fingers crack, blisters form, and you realize there's no end to the labor, no shift to clock out from. Only sunrise to sundown, every day a cog in a machine fueled by human misery. You return to Barrack B tour just before dusk, if you manage to stand at all. Dinner is a black bread ration, 2 thin slices, and maybe a spoonful of watery turnip stew if you're lucky. You chew each bite as though it were gold, but the bread tastes of sawdust and the stew of muddy water. You swallow tears with every mouthful because you know it's not enough to keep you from starving. Nevertheless, these morsels are chapters between moments of agony. Without them, you might never make it to the next morning's roll call. The barracks are alive with the rustle of lice and murmur of misery. You crawl onto your bunk as other prisoners wake to greet you with hollow stares. Each bunk board is splintered, coated in the petrified blood of long-dead occupants, skeletons of comfort lost. Beneath your bunk, the ground is a patchwork of mud and urine. The smell clings to boots, even after countless attempted cleansings. A bucket in the corner offers water, nearly black with dirt, enough to dampen a rag for washing your face, but not to ease the chapped sores around your lips. Fleas rule this place. They swarm your ankles at night, forming tiny colonies that feast on your thin skin. You slap at them, wincing as your palm connects with your leg. You scratch until your nails bleed, desperate for any relief. When the lights go out, darkness is thicker than tar. You find yourself listening to the breathing of your bunkmates, some snoring, some coughing, some silent. You can't tell which is worse. Sleep is a fragmented concept. You learn to doze in short bursts, half-conscious, always alert for the slightest shift in the barrack. An SS boot scraping, the rats rustle near your pillow, a fellow prisoner's final gasp. You breathe through your nose to minimize the shock of icy air on your lungs, warming each inhalation with the faintest effort. You recall your mother's old advice: breathe slow, breathe shallow, and you try, though each breath feels like dragging a blade across your throat. Rumors swirl of a place called Birkenau, Auschwitz II, where trains deliver new arrivals daily. You hear stories from returning laborers. They speak of enormous brick buildings labeled Ungarische Familien, Hungarian families, of crowds herded inside under the guise of showering. You learn that shower is a euphemism for death. The gas chambers are disguised as delousing facilities, cold rooms with shower heads and whitewashed walls. You imagine warm water and soap, but instead, eyes that fill with panic as Zyklon B pellets hiss down, turning your last breaths into poison. You glimpse the chimneys from afar, tall cylinders, coughing plumes of black smoke. You see the Sonderkommando dragging bodies from the gas chambers. They move like machines, numb, broken. You hear the bones crack beneath shovels as they clear remains for the ovens. Every day at dawn, the sky is streaked in orange, as if the sun itself is smeared with guilt. In the scent of burning flesh, you recognize the finality. Here, hope is cremated. On one winter morning, you witness a transport arrival. 300 new prisoners in rags. They step off cattle cars, naked in the snow. SS doctors stand on a raised platform, flicking clipboards and barking orders. Links, rechts, left, right. You watch as hundreds shuffle silently to the right, never to return. Faces you once might have recognized are gone, only smoke and ash where they stood. In the barracks infirmary, Krankenbau, the word hospital lies in a cruel joke. Wooden cots line the walls, each occupied by a prisoner moaning in fever dream. Typhus spreads like wildfire. Lice infest everyone, and the blankets cannot be washed. When you are sick, you return to the infirmary when you can still stand. A nurse in a grey smock takes your temperature with a bare metal cup, shrugs, and assigns you to a couch in the corner, far from any heat source. You shiver under a thin blanket as your body burns with fever. You drift between delirium and lucidity, hallucinating the faces of family members long gone. Food here is nearly non-existent, just a sip of broth and a slice of bread daily. You learn that to avoid being selected for the Vernichtung durch Arbeit, extermination through labor, you must not appear too weak. Otherwise, you are deemed unfit and sent to the gas chamber. So, you refuse to die quietly. You pretend to chew. You swallow. You even tuck half your ration beneath your sleeve to nibble later. The nurse catches you once, snatches the bread, and laughs scornfully. "Zu gierig, Jude? Too greedy, Jude?" She discards the stolen bread into a bucket of filth, and you realize hunger is not your greatest enemy. Shame is. Others are not as fortunate. You count the bodies carried out nightly by the Sonderkommando. Their absence in the morning is stark. Empty cots, stained blankets, final breaths that escaped into the cold, unforgiving night. In a place designed to crush hope, tiny sparks of resistance flicker in the darkness. One prisoner hides a morsel of bread in a seam of his coat, passing crumbs to a group of younger men in the latrine. They press the crumbs to their mouths, relief mingling with guilt as they taste something other than despair. You slip a small piece of bread to a man coughing so violently his chest shakes. He tears off a corner from his thin blanket to wrap it in, giving you a grateful nod. This is how survival works here. Each crumb traded, each whispered word, a flickering defiance against the system that wants to erase you. You also witness clandestine religious rituals. In the far corner of the barrack, two men press their brow to the rough wooden floor, secretly reciting the Shema, the ancient Jewish declaration of faith. When guards pass by, they fold quickly into their straw bunk, muffling prayers so the only witnesses are the lice that crawl across their blankets. One night, you join them, reciting psalms in a tremulous whisper. The words feel like fire in your throat, comforting, even as the chill tries to freeze your lips. A Polish civilian worker, indentured to the camp, surreptitiously slides you a thin strip of toilet paper scrawled with news from the outside. The Allies have landed in Normandy. Paris has fallen under the liberation forces. You hide that scrap in your shirt, pressing it against your heart as you stand at roll call. For a moment, the barrack's horizon stretches beyond barbed wire. A sliver of freedom flickers. That scrap of paper is more life than that scant bowl of broth, more warmth than the thin, lice-ridden blanket. In mid-1944, rumours swirl of Soviet advances toward the camp. SS officers grow frantic, more brutal. They force new arrivals on a death march to other camps, cold bodies drifting away in the snow. You know this march as a journey with no destination, only deeper into anguish. One morning, your barrack is ordered to assemble. You and 200 others, bound with rope, marched out into the biting wind. You feel the cold gnawing at your bones as you stumble through fields of frost-hardened mud, each step a struggle. Those too weak to walk are kicked until they collapse. Bullets crack overhead, a grim punctuation to a senseless march. You awaken one dawn to the roar of artillery in the distance, shells arching across the sky like terrible fireworks. The earth trembles beneath your shaking legs. Guards bark orders as SS trucks arrive. Officers shove you into cattle cars once more, shivering among corpses too broken to move. The train lurches forward, carrying survivors deeper into the Reich's heart as front lines shift. On January 27, 1945, the train grinds to a halt. Russian soldiers have liberated Birkenau. You step onto snowdrifts that glint like shards of glass. The SS guards have fled, abandoning their posts. You wander through the barbed wire gates, dragging each foot as though your body weighs 1,000 bricks. The smell of burning embers lingers. The chimneys no longer smoke, but stand like skeletal sentinels. You see survivors emerging from barracks, emaciated figures blinking at the cold sun. Some collapse onto the snow, tears freezing on their cheeks. In that moment, you realize the world has not forgotten you entirely. A Soviet medic hands you a loaf of black bread and a mug of steaming tea. The warmth floods your chest, melting the ice built up inside your bones. You draw your father's gaunt face into view. He stands beside you, leaning on a makeshift cane fashioned from a broom handle. His eyes brim with tears as he grasps your hand. "Wir sind frei. We are free," he whispers. You nod, unable to speak, overwhelmed by a tide of relief and grief. Around you, survivors embrace, weep, and sing, tentative notes of hope cut through the winter's hush. In the weeks following liberation, you linger in the camp's infirmary as the Soviet army sets up a field hospital. You receive clean clothes, bittersweet in their softness. You learn to eat again, fresh bread, boiled potatoes, even a slab of cheese. Each bite is a small revelation, yet every swallow brings back memories of empty bowls and black bread rations. You feel phantom hunger pangs, a gnawing void that no amount of food can fill. As you recover, you're summoned to a gathering in the remains of the Auschwitz library, books scattered on the floor, pages torn. A Polish film crew interviews survivors. Their stories replay over and over, grainy footage capturing each quivering lip and haunted eye. You stand behind the camera, not yet ready to speak your truth. When it's your turn, you whisper your name, Miriam Cohen, and choke on the syllables. You describe the gas chambers, the barracks, the roll calls. As you speak, each word feels like a brick removed from a wall around your soul, leaving you vulnerable, raw. After liberation, you return to a world still reeling. You search for any surviving family members. Only distant cousins remain, who greet you with tears and trembling hugs. They give you a small apartment in Krakow, a sliver of home. You hang a single photo above your bed, your father, free of uniform, smiling for the first time in years. Beneath, you place Miriam's tattered shawl in a glass case. It becomes your most precious possession, a testament to the sister who perished. Years later, you return to Auschwitz as a witness. You walk the deserted grounds, barracks now silent, chimneys still standing like accusing fingers, train tracks leading nowhere. Tourists move quietly through the site, cameras clicking. You guide them past the block where you slept, the crematoria where you watched smoke rise like a dark offering to the sky. You speak with measured calm, pointing to the bunk where your father and you huddled, to the spot where you parted from Miriam. You describe each detail, how the straw felt beneath you, how the wind bit into your bones, how you breathed only through your nose to warm each inhalation. They listen, some weep, some remain stunned into silence. In telling your story, you carry a heavy weight, 6 million names carried on your chest, an ocean of unspoken prayers swirling inside you. Yet in each recounting, you find a spark of hope. That memory can be stronger than erasure, that words can function as lifeboats in a sea of oblivion. Your testimony becomes your act of defiance, ensuring that the horrors of Auschwitz remain etched in human consciousness. Continuing your story of survival under Nazism, we now enter the Warsaw Ghetto, a walled city of despair imposed upon over 400,000 Jews in occupied Poland. Imagine a U-shaped ring of brick walls, barbed wire atop every section, patrol towers bristling with armed soldiers, and gates that lock at dawn and unlock at dusk. Inside, entire families, tradesmen, scholars, and children are packed into cramped, dilapidated tenements. 6 or 7 people to a single room, kitchens shared between dozens, and streets choked with filth and filth-borne disease. It is late autumn 1940 when you and your mother are forced to move here. You stand at the ghetto's outer wall, patched together from discarded stone and crumbling mortar. An SS officer barks, "Rain, schnell!" Inside, quickly. The gate clangs shut behind you. Beneath it, scraps of newspapers, discarded postcards, and broken toys lie in a greasy mess. As the lock snaps, the world beyond the wall vanishes. No more tram cars, no more shop windows glittering with glass. Only the narrow, winding alleys of the ghetto and the cries of neighbors denying that this is their end. Your tenement building is overrun with coughing. A doctor's sign hangs crookedly above the doorway. Arztpraxis geschlossen. Doctor's practice closed. Your family's belongings, once spread across 2 floors, are confiscated by German property police. You watch as they load your father's tools, your mother's sewing machine, and every ounce of scrap metal into a dumpster. You clutch your little sister's hand as your mother gently says, "Hab Vertrauen," have faith, though her voice is brittle. Inside the apartment, you already sense the stench. Once a living room, the single-windowed room is now home to 12 souls. Your mother, sister, aunt, 2 cousins, an elderly uncle, and 5 others you have never met. A single kerosene lamp flickers on a table stacked with damp newspapers. The floor is uneven, smeared with the grime of hundreds of feet. The air is thick with tuberculosis. Your uncle's hacking cough rattles the walls, and the constant clatter of pots from 10 adjoining kitchens. Beds are a luxury you do not have. Instead, straw sacks sewn together lie along the edges of the room. Fleas and lice are part of life, and scratching oneself is a silent admission of one's mortality. You share your straw-filled pallet with your little sister. Her cheek is warm against your arm, but her breath is shallow. You slip your hand beneath her ragged blanket and feel her ribs beneath thin cotton. You swallow back a cry and force yourself to breathe shallow, nose only, to warm each inhalation. Days here are a measured calculus of survival, calories in versus calories out. A single slice of dark, brick-hard bread, blackened from the sawdust used to pad it, lasts half a day. You line up before dawn at the Lebensmittelstelle, food distribution office, clutching a ration card that entitles you to a tiny portion of meager soup. The line snakes through alleys where rats scurry beneath shuffling feet. You hear whispers. Die Suppe heute ist dünn wie Wasser. Today's soup is as thin as water. No one dares complain. The person next to you might drop dead from starvation before the sun sets. Your mother sends you each day to collect water from the communal taps. You step into the courtyard where SS guards mark off lines with chalk. You join the throng, balancing an empty bucket on your shoulder. The tap drips a trickle of grey water. For minutes, you and dozens of others wait as each person fills a single bucket. No more, no less. You cradle the weight home, feeling it slosh in your arms. At home, you leave a small ladle cupful aside for your little sister's stubby spoon. The rest is boiled until it smells less foul before being ladled into 2 chipped bowls, one for your uncle and one for you. Winter 1941 brings a frozen landscape. Barbed wire cuts white ice through the grey sky. The Arbeit macht frei, work sets you free, sign at the ghetto gate is long gone, replaced by razor wire. German workers arrive each morning to tear down tenement facades, brick by brick, supposedly to renovate. Instead, homes collapse into rubble. Survivors search the ruins for an intact brick to build makeshift stoves that burn once, twice, then choke into cold. You remember summer gardens from your childhood, roses and iris petals soft underfoot. But here the ground is hard as bone, offering nothing but mud and frozen sewer water. Disease spreads like wildfire. Typhus rages unchecked, passed from body to body by lice. Children weaken overnight, their small bodies curled like broken toys. Your younger sister's cough is insistent, wet, rattling, as if she's inhaling shards of glass. There is no doctor to treat her. The local infirmary is overwhelmed. You watch as neighbors burn straw mats before the door, hoping smoke will drive the lice away, but they return. You gather rainwater for your sister's cloth bandage, dipping a scrap of cotton in boiled tea and pressing it to her fevered brow. Yet, amid this misery, a quiet resilience takes root. In the cramped courtyard, you catch a glimpse of a hidden school, a handful of teachers whispering arithmetic and Yiddish poetry to clusters of children huddled in ditches between buildings. When German patrols pass, they scatter. No one wants to be caught reading. But at night, secret lessons continue in the attic. Children recite lessons by candlelight, voices trembling, their dreams clinging to verses from the Hebrew Bible. Music emerges too, in hushed notes. A violinist, once a concert musician at the Philharmonic, plucks ghostly melodies in a sub-basement. His bow is a twig, and his strings are threads pulled from old drapes. Yet, each note resonates, carrying hope to those who listen. You slip down the corridor to hear him, huddled among others whose breath mingles in visible puffs of fog. The sound of Vivaldi's Winter Movement drifts through the dank air, a reminder that beauty can exist even in slaughter. Food remains the central obsession. You barter anything, a scrap of fabric for a handful of potatoes, a stolen loaf of bread for a pair of socks. Your father's old pocket watch, once a treasured family heirloom, fetches 2 small onions in the black market. You trade the onions back to an apothecary staged near the back wall for a vial of castor oil, used to treat intestinal parasites. Each swallow tastes like rancid dirt, but it eases your sister's pain for a few hours. Early 1942 brings news of deportations to the east. The Judenrat, Jewish council, summons heads of households to an office in the council building. A collaborator appointed by the Germans stands on a raised balcony, reading names in a list. You stand shoulder to shoulder with other parents, waiting until your mother hears, "You Cohen, Meldung in Raum 2. You Cohen, report to room 2. Heart pounding, she follows an aide into the room, clutching the letter in her trembling hand. You and your little sister stay behind, hearts thudding, as if to strike your ribs from the inside. Minutes later, your mother emerges, face as pale as the winter sun. She folds the letter in half and places it under your father's hat before handing it to him. He nods, the only sign that he understands their fate. On May 22, 1942, the first deportation train rumbles into the ghetto. At dawn, SS officers smash into apartments, dragging men, women, and children roughly into the streets. The ghetto's U-shape becomes a funnel. Those selected for deportation are forced onto platforms of freight cars like livestock. You and your sister hide behind a pile of refuse, watching your mother held at gunpoint as she tries to plead for mercy. The train departs, a cloud of steam and smoke, its whistle echoing through the walled city, carrying 6,000 souls to Treblinka that same day. Silence falls. The gates do not open for weeks. The ghetto's population shrinks from 450,000 to under 250,000. Word spreads that those sent to Treblinka go to work and are never heard from again. You learn to quiet your voice mid-sentence if someone near you vanishes. When someone knocks on the door, you pretend to be asleep. Anything to avoid being summoned to the trains. Summer 1942 brings another wave of selections. Twice a week, gates open for the actions, and SS officers stand in formation like executioners. Jews, healthy or too young to work, are separated from those deemed useful. Mothers clutch infants, begging guards to let them stay if the baby can crawl. But the guards bark, "Schnell! Weiter! Quickly, move on!" The line dissolves into a river of despair. You watch as friends and neighbors are shoved onto cattle cars without water. You clutch your sister's hand, promising each other silently, "Wir bleiben zusammen." We stay together. By mid-1942, conditions degrade further. Overcrowding intensifies. Buildings meant for 50 now house 500. Sewers overflow. Cholera outbreaks sweep through. You stand under a spigot trying to scoop water from a broken hydrant, while around you footsteps echo. Someone's final steps before they collapse from dehydration. At night, the stench of decomposing bodies wafts through the narrow alleys. You hold your sister's hand as you pass a building where a collapsed body is dragged away by neighbors, never identified, never mourned. Despite rising death tolls, tens of thousands die each month, and underground resistance begins to solidify. In a cramped basement, lit by a single candle, Jewish fighters train in stolen pistols and homemade Molotov cocktails. You recall your father's once sly grin as he handed you a sharpened nail. Für den Notfall. For emergencies. In shared whispers, you learn of a plan to revolt when mass deportations intensify. You hide messages sewn into the seams of your sister's undergarments. A word here, a number there, passaging instructions to bunkmates when they least expect it. Spring 1943. The last deportation wave begins. The Germans try a final, grosser actions, great action, but the underground fighters, around 600 strong, go into open revolt. You wake to the crack of gunfire before dawn, the clatter of German rifles, and shouted orders from both sides. Windows shatter as Molotov cocktails explode against SS patrol cars. You cram into a small hidden room behind a false bookshelf. Through a peephole, you glimpse your father firing a stolen pistol, taking down an SS guard before running out of bullets. A second later, a grenade hisses and feathers your father's uniform with shrapnel. You hear him collapse. Your mother's scream pierces the chaos. By dusk, the SS forces crush the uprising building by building. Gas vans roll into courtyards, engines roaring as the last resistance fighters stand their ground. You and your sister slip out under cover of rubble, following a network of sewers beneath the city. The stench nearly knocks you unconscious, but you press on, faith guiding you through the darkness. You emerge at dawn into the small district of Muranov, where a few hundred survivors eke out a meager existence among burned-out shells of once grand townhouses. Over the next weeks, the ghetto is liquidated. Walls are torn down, rubble cleared, and bricks repurposed for German military use. When Warsaw's population returns to 1 million by late 1943, the new city is unrecognizable. Shattered cathedrals, collapsed synagogues, empty plazas where life once thrived. You wander through this Aryan side, wearing a stolen overcoat and a forged identity card. Your hair is hidden beneath a felt hat. Your hands tremble as you pay for a bowl of soup in a cafe, pretending to be Polish Christian. Your sister, now 10, speaks no Polish. She clings to you when you avoid the Gestapo checkpoint near Nowolipki. Finally, you find a Catholic orphanage run by a priest sympathetic to Jews. You slide her through a hidden door, masking her identity. Gera Beidziega, be courageous. You whisper before leaving her there with a small cross you pin to her dress. You walk away, alone, your sister's sobs haunting your footsteps. You spend months seeking shelter with a Polish family, refusing any payment, only your gratitude. You work odd jobs, a tailor's helper, a messenger for the underground, anything to stave off detection. Each day is a gamble. You repeat your name, you, a mantra that reminds you of your identity. In January 1945, Soviet troops approach Warsaw. The retreating German forces raze the city in retaliation for the 1944 Warsaw Uprising. You witness bulldozers pushing debris into piles that smolder. You hide in a collapsed cellar as bombs fall overhead, ceilings trembling, bricks raining on your head. As the Red Army liberates Warsaw, you emerge from hiding. You step into a landscape of death. Bodies lie in the open, unburied, frozen in twisted tableau. The air is dirty, the sky grey. You search for your sister. At the orphanage, you find her thin face peering from behind a barracks door. She doesn't fling herself into your arms. She only nods, eyes glazed. You hold her close, mindful of her fragile bones. In the weeks that follow, you and your sister journey to a displaced persons camp outside Krakow. You live in a repurposed elementary school, sharing a room with widows and orphans. You attend classes on Hebrew and history, determined to rebuild what was shattered. Allied newspapers filter in, reports of Nuremberg trials, testimonies of Eichmann and Himmler. The word Holocaust begins to appear, an attempt to capture what words can scarcely describe. Millions are on the move. You register with the International Red Cross, hoping for a route to Palestine. You and your sister board a British transport ship in Gdynia in late 1945. The deck smells of salt. You hold each other on the heaving waves, watching the horizon, waiting for a future you cannot yet imagine. By early 1946, you reach Haifa and settle again in the kibbutz near the Carmel foothills. Here, you and your sister plant new olive trees, trees born in soil, untainted by barbed wire. You teach children to read Torah, verses you once memorized in your childhood. Your sister, silent for years, begins to speak again in broken Hebrew. One night, she hums that same lullaby from Berlin. You weep quietly. A year later, you return to Warsaw to testify before the People's Court. You stand before a gathering of survivors and Allied observers. You recount each memory, the soup lines, the hidden prayers, the collapse of tenement walls, the uprising, the flight through sewers. Each word cracks like ice underfoot. Survivors weep, listeners shift uncomfortably. When you finish, an old neighbor approaches. He offers you a worn loaf of rye, a gift he says he saved for you since the ghetto. You take the bread as a symbol, one that speaks of shared loss and restoration. You and your sister carry it back to the kibbutz. In the courtyard, you break the loaf in half, one piece for you, one for your sister. You taste its dense crust, sweet dough born from liberated fields. Tears sting your eyes, tears of sorrow, gratitude, and a fierce resolve to ensure that such darkness never returns. Reflection on the journey. Across Berlin, Auschwitz, and Warsaw, your story threads through the tapestry of Nazi terror and Jewish resilience. In Berlin, life started under a growing shadow, whispered rumors, humiliating laws, and the ever-present fear of violent raids. There, survival meant navigating ration lines, secret prayers, and the faint warmth of a coal stove in a drafty flat. At Auschwitz, the abyss yawned wide. Trains delivered you to a landscape where labor replaced humanity and hope was smothered under ash. Stone barracks, roll calls at dawn, forced work in gravel pits, and the stench of burning flesh. This was the daily curriculum in a school without mercy. Yet, in the crackle of makeshift violins and stolen crumbs of bread, you found flickers of defiance. The Warsaw Ghetto sealed the final stage, a walled death trap where starvation, disease, and deportations reduced entire families to rubble. You learned that survival there meant trading every scrap of dignity for a single slice of bread, whispering prayers in hidden attics, and training in secret to fight back in an uprising that became a symbol of Jewish courage. In each place, names vanished, replaced by numbers or hidden behind false identities. Yet, your identity persisted in whispered prayers, in the songs you shared with fellow prisoners, in the stolen scraps of bread you handed to your sister. You clung to faith, family, and the faintest promise of tomorrow. The arc of your journey, from Berlin's stifling shadow through Auschwitz's concrete nightmare to Warsaw's final stand, illuminates the indestructible spirit of a people determined to endure. Each chapter reveals that even at the precipice of oblivion, small acts of humanity, teaching a child to read, hiding a piece of bread, offering a sympathetic glance, can defy the darkness. Your story is not just a chronicle of suffering, it is a testament to resilience. From the cramped tenements of Berlin to the chimneys of Auschwitz and the barbed wire of Warsaw, you emerged, scarred but unbroken. Your words, your memory, and your unwavering commitment to bearing witness stand as a bulwark against forgetting. So if you have followed this journey, from the suffocating fear in Berlin to the freezing nights of Auschwitz and the walled jail of the Warsaw Ghetto, take a moment to reflect. Remember these places not as abstractions, but as landscapes of real lives lived, hopes kindled, and faith tested. The names may have been erased, but the human spirit endures. Thank you for listening and for honoring these memories. May your empathy guide you, and may the lessons of history ensure that never again is always more than a promise. It is a commitment